In a lab in Parma, Italy, a monkey reached for a peanut, and a specific cluster of neurons fired in its brain. Nothing unusual there. That's what brains do when a body moves. But then the monkey stopped moving. It sat still and watched a researcher reach for the same peanut, and the exact same neurons fired again. The monkey wasn't doing anything. It was only watching, and its brain lit up as if it had reached for the peanut itself. The researchers, led by a neuroscientist named Giacomo Rizzolatti, had stumbled onto something they weren't even looking for. Cells that couldn't tell the difference between doing a thing and watching someone else do it. They called them mirror neurons. And once you know they exist, a small, annoying mystery in your own life starts to make sense. There's someone you can be around for 20 minutes and afterward, you feel like you ran a mile. Nothing happened, no argument, no favor asked. You didn't lift anything or solve anything. You just sat there in the same room, breathing the same air. And somehow you walked away emptied out. And you've never had a good word for why. You probably blamed yourself, told yourself you were tired already or being dramatic or too sensitive. What if it was none of those things? What if your brain was quietly reaching for the peanut the whole time? Because if watching an action can fire the same circuits as performing it, then watching a person, their tension, their agitation, the storm going on behind their face, might be doing something to you that you never agreed to. Something automatic, something you've been paying for without ever seeing the bill. Almost 2,000 years before anyone put a person in a brain scanner, a former slave turned philosopher already had a name for the thing that lands on you before you can stop it. He called it an impression, and he was more right than he could have possibly known. There's someone in your life who does this to you. You know exactly who came to mind just now. Hold on to them. Because by the end of this, you're going to have language for what they do, and, for the first time, something you can actually do about it. That finding stayed a curiosity about monkeys and peanuts for a while. Then, someone pointed a scanner at a human face. Picture the last time you sat across from someone in the middle of a crisis. Not your crisis, theirs. Their jaw was tight, their leg was going under the table. Their voice had that clipped, wound-up edge to it, the words coming a little too fast. And you did nothing. You listened. You nodded in the right places. You said the calming things. You were, by any measure, just a person in a chair. And you left that chair more tired than they did. When you sat there watching their face, your brain wasn't politely observing from a safe distance. It was running a copy. In 2003, a group of researchers ran a study with a title so blunt it's almost funny. Both of Us Disgusted in My Insula. They put people in a scanner and had them smell something genuinely revolting. A particular patch of the brain, the anterior insula, lit up. Fine. That's the part that handles that gut-level, get-it-away-from-me feeling. But then they showed those same people a video of someone else's face curling up in disgust. No smell this time. Just a face, and the same patch lit up again. The region your brain uses to feel disgusted fires whether you smell the rotten thing yourself or just watch someone else smell it. Your brain wasn't reading their expression like a road sign. It was reconstructing the feeling on the inside, borrowing it, running their state through your own hardware. So when you sat across from that wound-up, jittery person, some quiet part of you was building a working model of their agitation using your own nervous system as the raw material. You weren't picking up on their mood in some vague, spiritual, empath way. You were physically simulating it. And simulations cost energy. This reframes something you've probably been carrying wrong for years. It isn't weakness. It isn't you being fragile or needy or too soft for the world. It's architecture, the same equipment that lets a mother know her baby is in pain, the same equipment that makes a whole crowd wince when one person trips. It's involuntary. You didn't choose it, and you can't switch it off by deciding to. I used to think I was just an empathetic person. Said it like a compliment, even. Turns out that was a much nicer way of saying my nervous system doesn't know how to mind its own business. It picks up every signal in the room and files a report whether I asked for one or not, which would almost be fine if the story stopped there. It doesn't. Every piece of advice you have ever been handed for this problem is basically the same piece of advice wearing different clothes. Set a boundary. Protect your energy. Don't let them get to you. Guard your peace. It all sounds reasonable. It all sounds like something a calm person would say. And it all rests on one silent assumption that turns out to be false, that you get a vote before it happens. You're standing at your desk or your kitchen counter, doing something ordinary. Someone walks in. You haven't heard a word yet. You don't know what they want. But there's a tightness in how they move, a charge coming off them, and before they've opened their mouth, you feel your own shoulders climb toward your ears. Your stomach does a small thing. You are already braced. Look at the timeline there. You reacted before you had any information, before the conversation, before there was anything to set a boundary against. That's not a figure of speech. In 2000, a Swedish researcher named Ulf Dimberg wired people up with sensors that read the tiny electrical activity in their facial muscles, activity far too small to see with the naked eye. Then he flashed pictures of faces at them, happy faces, angry faces, and people's own muscles started to copy what they saw. The smile muscles twitched at smiles. The frown muscles twitched at frowns. Ordinary so far. Then he flashed some of those faces so fast that people never consciously saw them. A fraction of a second, then covered up by another image. They had no idea they'd been shown an angry face at all. And their frown muscles still moved. Their bodies answered a face their minds never even registered. The whole thing happened in about 300 to 400 milliseconds, a third of a second, faster than thought, faster than you deciding anything. So look at what that does to all the good advice. Set a boundary against a reaction that already finished before you knew it started. Protect your energy from a transfer that completed in the time it takes to blink. You've been told over and over to guard a door the thing already walked through. No wonder it never worked. You weren't failing at it. You were aiming at the wrong moment entirely. The mimicry isn't the enemy, and it isn't a flaw in you. It's just fast. Much faster than the part of you that would ever want to say, which means the real question was, never. How do I stop this from happening? It already happened. The real question is what happens in the half-second after. Epictetus was born a slave, not a metaphorical one. An actual enslaved person in the Roman Empire, owned by a wealthy man with a leg that was crippled, by some accounts from the brutality of his early life. He knew, in a way most of us never will, that some things simply happen to you, that the world can reach in and do what it wants with your circumstances and never once ask your permission. So when he eventually won his freedom and started teaching, he didn't build his philosophy on staying calm or thinking positive or any of the soft things his name gets attached to now. He started somewhere much stranger. He started by splitting every experience you have into two pieces. The first piece he called the impression. In Greek, fantasia. It's whatever lands on you, the sight of that tense face, the sound of that clipped voice, the sudden tightening in your own chest. The impression arrives on its own. You don't summon it, and you can't refuse delivery. In his own teaching, he reached for the plainest example he could find. A sound strikes your ear. You didn't choose to hear it. It's just there. The second piece is the one almost nobody talks about. He called it assent, syncatathesis. It's what you do with the impression once it's arrived, whether you agree with the story it's trying to tell you, whether you pick it up and carry it or set it back down. And this, only this, was the part Epictetus said was actually yours. The sound reaching your ear, not up to you. What you make of the sound, entirely up to you. Do you see what he did there 2,000 years before Ulf Dimberg wired anybody up? He drew the exact line the science just drew for us. The mirrored tension, the borrowed agitation, the third of a second flinch, All of that is the impression. It arrives. That's the part that was never in your control, and every scanner we've built agrees with him. But the half-second after, the meaning you assign, the thing you do next, that's the ascent. That's the ground he said was yours the whole time. For years I thought focus on what you control was a fridge magnet, a nice, empty thing people say. I had no idea it was the back half of a two-step model, that the steps came in a specific order, and that I'd been trying to skip straight to step 2 my whole life, trying to control the impression, the thing that was never mine, and completely ignoring the ascent, the one thing that always was. Which raises the obvious question. It's a lovely theory. Epictetus found the lever 2,000 years ago and pointed right at it. But does the lever actually move anything? So the lever exists on paper. A former slave drew a clean line between the part that lands on you and the part that's yours. Lovely. But philosophy is cheap. Anyone can split an experience into 2 words. The question is whether the second word actually does anything when your body is already halfway into someone else's storm. In 2002, a group of researchers at Stanford, led by Kevin Oxner, decided to look. They put people in a brain scanner and showed them photographs designed to upset them, genuinely disturbing images. And they gave 2 different instructions. For some pictures, they told people to just look, let it land, feel whatever came. And when people did that, you could watch it happen on the scan. The amygdala, the brain's threat alarm, the thing that handles fear and gut-level distress, lit right up. Ordinary. That's the impression arriving exactly on schedule. For other pictures, they gave a different instruction first. Before the image fully hit, people were told to reinterpret it, to tell themselves a different story about what they were seeing, that a scene wasn't what it looked like, that the person in it would be okay, that the frame around it was different than they'd assumed, same disturbing images, same nervous systems. But this time, people stepped in at the meaning before the feeling finished forming, and the alarm got quieter, measurably. The amygdala response dropped, and the part of the brain doing the quieting was up front, behind the forehead, the prefrontal cortex, the deliberate, this is me choosing part. You could watch the ascent talk the impression down, live on a screen. Read that back against Epictetus, and it should raise the hair on your arms a little. He said the impression arrives on its own, and the response is the only thing that's yours. 2,000 years later, a scanner shows the arrival, the amygdala, and the response, the prefrontal cortex, as 2 different events in 2 different places in a specific order. He didn't have the machine. He just watched his own mind carefully enough to map what the machine would eventually confirm. I read through that study more than once, and not because it was complicated, because I didn't want it to be true. It meant all those years I spent sitting in someone else's tension, jaw locked, telling myself to just endure it and not let it show. I hadn't been strong. I'd been standing in the one spot on the whole timeline where nothing I did could help, and calling it patience. So the arrival isn't the fight. It was never the fight. The whole thing turns on one narrow window, the half-second after the impression lands and before it hardens into your afternoon. The only thing left to figure out is what you actually do in that window. You don't need a 5-step framework for this. You don't need an app or a morning routine or a laminated card in your wallet. You need about 1 second used correctly at the right moment. That's the whole thing. That's what 2,000 years of philosophy and 20 years of brain scans come down to. So picture it. You're with that person again. The tight one. The one whose mood fills a room like a smell. And you feel it start. The jaw, the shallow breath, the low hum of irritation that has no clear source because it was never yours to begin with. That feeling is the signal. Not a problem to fix. A bell going off, the impression is landed. You're standing in the window. And in that window you do one small, almost Embarrassingly simple thing. You name it. You say to yourself, quietly, this is his tension, not mine. This is her fear, not mine. You put their name on it silently in your own head, and you set it back down where it came from. That's not wishful thinking. In 2007, a neuroscientist at UCLA named Matthew Lieberman put this exact move under a brain scanner. When people simply named a feeling, put one plain word on it, the amygdala, that same alarm we watched fire earlier, went quieter. And the deliberate part of the brain, up behind the forehead, lit up in its place. Naming the thing turned the volume down. The naming isn't decoration. The naming is the ascent. It's you in the window, choosing which story to pick up. And it's worth being clear about what this is not. It isn't becoming cold. It isn't building a wall or caring less or turning into the kind of person nothing reaches. The mirror neurons still fire. You'll still feel the room. You're not trying to stop being human. You couldn't if you tried. The equipment doesn't have an off switch. You're just stepping into the 1 second that was always yours and declining to carry home a weight that was never yours to lift. Think back to that person from the start, the one who came to mind, the one who empties you out for reasons you could never name. Nothing about them has changed. They'll be exactly the same the next time you see them. But you're walking in with something you didn't have before. You know what's happening now. You know the tiredness isn't weakness. It's a borrowed signal. You know there's a window. And you know the one word that goes in it. So the next time you leave someone's company feeling hollowed out, before you blame yourself for it, just ask whose feeling you've been carrying. Sometimes the most patient thing you can do is set it down. If any of this landed, there's a whole philosophy built on that exact gap, the space between what happens to you and what you do next. It's quiet here. Stay a while.